Welcome to another episode of The Breakdown. It is July 14th, 2024. We have so much that we could be talking about tonight, but as we said before, we're kind of playing with a little bit of a format. Let's play with some different formats for the summer. Let's have some summer fun. So we're going to try to do a little bit more of that tonight because it's a bit of a heavy weekend for anybody who's got a pulse. It's been a bit of a weekend, bit of a historic thing, bit of a may you live in interesting times curse kind of times thing. Um, Obviously, we're talking about the attempted assassination attempt on the the presidential candidate for the United States, Donald J. Trump. That's all we're going to talk about in regards to Donald J. Trump tonight, because there's lots of other things to talk about, but there's this core issue that we wanted to try to explore a little bit tonight. There is lots going on in Alberta politics. We are going to spend some time doing the deep dives that we've promised on all of these issues. There's the Bears, There's the problems with the grizzly bears, where the UCP government has said, hey, you know what? If we deem a bear to be a problem bear, even though it's a species at risk, I think I'm using that terminology correctly, we're gonna let people pay to shoot them and then keep the trophies, because that's not problematic at all. There's been a lot of conversations about Airdrie urgent care. We're going to be doing a deep dive on that one very, very soon, because the healthcare situation in Airdrie has been getting, to call it out of control for a while now would be a gross understatement. It has been out of control for a good long while. And one of the things that people of Airdrie have been waiting for is a hospital. Sounds like it's not quite going to be a hospital that they're getting. We're going to be doing a deep dive coming up on that. We could talk about today's the last day of the Stampede. Thank God. We could talk about the fascinating claims that the city of Calgary has been making in regards to the water usage and implying potential causes of it. And we've certainly received no shortage of DMs this week where people have said, "Hey, are you going to talk about that certain talk show host who said that life isn't fair in regards to access to healthcare?" And did some fact checking. We could talk about all these things tonight, but we're not. We're going to talk about just a couple of very basic things. And to talk about these things, we're going to start. I'm going to bring a guest onto the show, because we got to talk about this guitar right here. Now, the reason why we're talking about this guitar, by the way, 1963 Harmony Bobcat. It's a fascinating story about how that guitar came into my possession almost 2 decades ago, involving rural Alberta, a polka band, and the best lead guitarist that you will ever have seen in your life for a polka band. But that's a story for another day. That guitar was my first guitar ever. Not ever. I had an acoustic guitar before that, but it had horrible strings and the action was bad and it made my fingers bleed. And it was no fun to play. That was the guitar that I learned how to play guitar on. It accompanied me through many, many, many shows, many aggressive shows. For anybody who's familiar, I talk on times about how I used to be a bit of a punk rocker. That show saved my life at more than a couple of shows, not just from breaking falls or breaking amps, maybe occasionally bumping into the occasional Nazi skinhead. I don't know. I can't remember. But the guitar is very loyal companion. And after a few years of that guitar getting utilized, we'll say, it needed some repair work. But like I said, it's in 1963. That guitar is older than me, believe it or not, by a long shot. And so I wanted to make sure that I went somewhere that would take very good care of this beloved guitar of mine. And I spoke to a bunch of different people. There were a bunch of shops that were around at the time. And finally, I settled on, after the advice of a couple of really old school blues players, I settled on this one place. Now, this one place was in an industrial area, and it was run by a gentleman who was, were we to call him ornery, we would be grossly understating it. This gentleman was uh, not a people person. And sometimes when you walk into a shop, you can tell. You walk into a shop and everything's meticulous, everything's clean, everything's put in all the places. And those places always kind of make me go, there's a formula here. His shop was anything but. There were, I think, at least one dog. There were multiple cats. The entire shop had that vague veneer of tobacco that you get on walls when somebody smoked in that place for a bajillion years. It was chaos. There were parts everywhere. It was just it looked like somebody had blown up a bunch of vintage guitars and vintage amplifiers. And that's when I knew I've got a guy who is absolutely miserable. His shop is in absolute disarray. This is the guy who's going to fix the guitar. 100%, no questions asked. Because the reality is, for him to have gotten the reviews that he got, and I'll add, he worked on B.B. King's guitars when B.B. King came to town. For him to have gotten the reviews that he got, he's got to be unbelievably good at working on guitars. He is an expert of the highest order on working on guitars. And I wanted my guitar work done. So it made perfect sense. This is the guy. I'm going to use this guy. And he did, for the record, a miraculous job on that beloved, beloved guitar of mine. But the point that I'm trying to make here is while he was an expert in guitar repair and restoration and all of those things, he wasn't a people person. And he didn't keep a particularly clean shop. He could have very easily alienated somebody who maybe had softer sensibilities, let's say. Those are all things that could have very, very easily happened. But this dude was an expert. He was renowned. He was spoken about in the highest regards by some of the best guitar players in the city, certainly the best guitar players that I ever crossed paths with. Now, how does this get to be relevant to Alberta politics? Well, it's pretty simple. At the end of the day, one of the big mistakes that we've maybe made in regards to how we do our democracy is we expect too much from our politicians. And because of that, our politicians behave in ways that they probably shouldn't. So, for example, politicians at the core, government, elected officials, their job is supposed to be taking the mandate that they get from voters of the electorate and making it a thing. Now, how they make it a thing is critically important. If government gets elected on a platform of, hey, you know what, the crime and the drugs, they're so bad, we need to deal with them. If somebody goes down that road and says, you know what, we're the party that's going to deal with the crime and the drugs and all of those very bad things that are making the downtowns of the cities that you live in so scary. If somebody's going to be that's their value proposition. The expectation shouldn't be that the leader of that party is an expert in dealing with crime or an expert in dealing with mental health issues or drug issues or addiction issues or toxic supply issues. That should not be the expectation. The expectation should be that that person who's elected is competent enough to be willing to go into all of these sketchy guitar repair stores to find the experts. And then they're supposed to listen to those experts. Fundamentally, a politician's job is supposed to be to listen to the people about what they want done and then listen to the experts about how those things wanted or should be executed. But that's not what we have created. We've created an environment where it seems like politicians believe that people expect them to be the experts on all of the things. And that's not how it used to be. It used to be if there were technical questions, elected officials would roll out technical experts and say, you know what, Bob, thanks so much for the question. It's a very important question. I want to make sure that it's given the absolute attention that it should be. So I've got Timmy over here. Timmy is the resident expert in whatever the fuck we're talking about today. And Timmy's going to give you the technical explanation for why we're pursuing this particular route. That's how it's supposed to be. But that's not what we have right now. What we have right now is elected officials who aren't even so much elected to, certainly with the provincial government that we have in this province right now, they're not elected to follow the will of the people. They're elected to follow the will of the people who paid all the money to get them into the offices so they could do what the people who paid all the money want them to do. We've seen this time and time again in this province, where particularly with the UCP government under Danielle Smith, and I mean, we've mentioned it on the show before. Jason Kenney had some challenges. There were some problems there. There's no questions. But Jason Kenney had a platform that he ran on. He didn't surprise anyone by the decisions that he made when he got into government because they were all very clearly written down. Danielle Smith is the absolute opposite of that because she wrote down a bunch of things she said she was going to do, didn't do them, but then did a bunch of other things that she said she wasn't going to do. It's all very confusing. But that's where the core of our problem lies. And ultimately, the responsibility is on us, the voters. Because instead of saying to premiers or MLAs or ministers, hey, I don't need you to be an expert in XYZ. What I need you to do is find the best experts possible, not the ones who align with your personal biases, not the ones who are going to advance the agenda of the people who donated money to get you into office, because that's not who you work for. You work for me. And we've done a very poor job of communicating that to our elected officials. And instead of elected officials doing what the people have said we sent you to do, they do a bunch of other things. And they cherry pick their experts to make sure that the decisions that they arrive at are the same conclusion that they went into the process with. And that's the fundamental problem. When we talk about the fundamental problem with the healthcare system right now, the fundamental problem is we have people in charge who believe the best route to solving the healthcare crisis in the province of Alberta is to privatize and to profitize as much as is possible. Evidence be damned. And there's no shortage of evidence that very clearly shows that when you go the private route or the profitization route, there's no shortage of evidence that makes it very, very clear that results in lower outcomes. People do worse, period. We talk about the Bears situation. There's no shortage of experts. I mean, it's a small group, but they're a vocal group. We're hoping to get one of them on the show in the next couple of weeks to talk about the questions of the Grizzly Bears, because it seems like all of the people who have lived experience, technical knowledge in conservation, and in particular conservation of grizzly bears and problem grizzly bears or problem interactions with people, all of them are saying, no, trophy hunting is absolutely not the right solution. But somehow the minister who has a vested interest in outfitting and hunting has come to the conclusion, you know what we should do? We should hunt the bears. We should let people shoot them. That would be the best thing that we could possibly do. When we talk about issues like safer supply, which we are going to be having a huge conversation about next weekend. Mark your calendars. July 21st, we're going to be having a conversation between Guy Felicella and Adam Zivo about safer supply, about the opioid crisis, about the toxic supply crisis. And we're going to see if we can't identify what it is that has created this disconnect where we have two extraordinarily passionate people who have come to completely different conclusions in regards to the best way to address these issues. But again, what we've seen from the provincial government in the province of Alberta has been, rather than look at the available evidence, rather than look at what are the actual medical treatments for the organic condition and state that is addiction, what are the underlying causes for addiction and substance use and substance abuse, what makes people want to do these things, rather than take a look at all of the evidence that very clearly spells it out. It's almost always trauma, by the way. Rather than address those things, the government has taken an ideological stance and said, you know what? Because there's a lot of people who just don't like the drugs, they're scary. Plus, scared people donate lots of money. We're going to say, yeah, all drugs are super bad. We're going to Nancy Reagan the shit out of this, and we'll see what happens. And all of the experts can already tell you that what's going to happen is a lot more people are going to unnecessarily die. And that's profoundly tragic. It's profoundly unfortunate, and it's utterly preventable. But again, we have governments that have not gotten into the job with the base assumption that their job is to execute the will of the people by accessing the best experts possible. And we're seeing this play out in issue after issue after issue, where people start right out of the gates with the conclusion, and then they source out information to back up the conclusion that they already came to. And we saw this very clearly play out when Dan Williams testified to a Senate committee, and he offered up a convoluted bag of word salad in regards to why a safer supply is just so very bad, and completely ignores the fact that a safer supply, in principle, is supposed to be a bridge so that people don't die from a toxic supply, so that they can access services, so that they can deal with the underlying things that have caused them to want to use drugs, or to choose to use drugs, or to continue to use drugs. All three very different things, by the way. Dan Williams did not express any kind of awareness of those background factors. And this is, again, the problem. For the life of me, I cannot figure out what business somebody has testifying to a Senate committee on the merits or disadvantages of safer supply when they have literally no background in medicine. They have literally no background in psychology, psychiatry, addiction studies, addiction treatment, trauma-informed care. I could go on with the very many things that Dan Williams does not have, and yet he feels as if he's qualified to read off some speaking notes that presumably somebody else prepared for him and present himself as competent to address any of these issues. We see this over and over again, this performative need to speak at committees by Danielle Smith. If anybody's going to talk about the energy situation in Alberta, well, it's going to be me. At least Danielle Smith has a history of advocacy for the energy sector, but that doesn't mean that she has the technical training, the technical awareness, or the technical abilities to address the greater problem that isn't just solved by continued reliance on oil and gas for everything. But there's a bigger conversation that we also need to have as well. Because one of the fascinating things that I experienced in the last week, because I basically said, you know what, I'm going to take the next week, next few days, and I'm just going to do me things. I'm just going to have some fun. I'm going to hang out with the family. I'm going to reconnect with some people that I haven't seen in quite a long time. And I got the opportunity to do that. And one of those conversations I found particularly enlightening. And so I wanted to share it because it's to be clear, it's anecdotal, but it highlights something really, really important in the way that we're presenting conversations. And this is something that we've tried to address for a few years now on the breakdown. It's something that we're certainly going to continue to address. But part of the reason for this rant tonight is to ask you, our audience, that if you see us failing on the front that I'm about to talk about here, please let us know. Because we are always trying to present the best form of the conversation that we possibly can. So, that being said, I'm sitting on a patio with a buddy of mine that I haven't seen in years and years and years and years. Fantastic guy. He's got a wife who's absolutely amazing. She's got tons of technical background in construction, in energy production, and of course, we start the conversation inevitably turns to politics. And there's a couple things that I found fascinating here. My buddy does not have social media. And in fact, when he reached out to me after we hadn't crossed paths for the better part of 2 decades, um, he wasn't even aware of my political troublemakings. But he was profoundly informed about the political climate in the province of Alberta. He is one of the people that would best be described as the silent majority, as is his wife. These two people are not politically active, but they're definitely politically aware. And at one point, the conversation turned towards the eastern slopes. And I made a couple of jokes about rich Australians because that's what I do. But the conversation did turn serious. And my friend's wife expressed a great deal of frustration because people were saying part of the argument against coal mining in the eastern slopes was, coal's bad, eh? We shouldn't be that dirty, dirty coal. We shouldn't be mining that dirty, dirty coal. And there is, for sure, a very clear argument to be made when it comes to coal for energy, because that's very, very bad. Even when we're talking about metallurgical coal, which is what would be coming out of the eastern slopes, it's not the cleanest option. But the options for the purposes that metallurgical coal would be used for are pretty limited. And her frustration was it's either going to be metallurgical coal to make steel, or it's going to be this other heavy electrically intensive process, in which case you're going to be using massive amounts of carbon producing fuels to generate that electricity in most cases. So what are we doing here? What are we actually talking about? Are we all saying we're never ever going to use steel again? And we went back and forth on that for a little while, and finally, I posed the argument, and I can see there's a couple people in the Twitter Spaces and the chat tonight that this argument will end with. But I posed the argument. There's some people who are just really concerned about the impact on the water supply. There's some people who are just really concerned about the selenium. And her response to that was, and that's a perfectly legitimate argument. And I wanted to share this story because what I took away from that whole interaction, what I took away from her saying, and that is a perfectly legitimate argument, was maybe we need to talk more about facts in these broad conversations. Maybe the concept of coal is bad is a little bit lacking of nuance. Maybe that's part of what the problem is. Maybe that's part of where the buy-in problem exists. Maybe we need to say, hey, metallurgical coal maybe has its places in some parts of the world. Sure would be great if we could generate enough electricity to do the metallurgical stuffs I'm not an expert on making steel by any stretch of the imagination. But wouldn't it be great if we could generate enough electricity to do those things without having to rely on forms of energy that are produced by the combustion of natural resources? That would be absolutely fantastic. But the selenium thing, it's going to kill ranching. It's going to kill agriculture. Probably going to kill some people. Probably going to destroy the water supply. What do you think about that? And instead of making it a part of a perceived greater agenda, just talking about, if somebody's holding a gun to your face, the conversation should probably start with, please don't shoot me, instead of guns are bad. Let me tell you why. And maybe that's part of the shift that we need to make in how we're having these conversations. Let's purely just talk about the facts. Let's purely just talk about what's actually going on, what the actual measurable impacts of things are. Because that piece of the conversation was enough for her to completely say, yeah, no, we shouldn't be coal mining in the Eastern Slopes. That's a no-brainer. The selenium's going to ruin everything. We don't have the technology to make sure that that's not going to go sideways on us. She had no problem with that. But when it was high-minded ideals, when it was abstracts, especially given that she knows the many different ways to make steel, she couldn't handle it. And so that's part of what we've been trying to do at the breakdown, and that's part what we're going to continue to try to do. We're going to try to talk about, the reality of things. We're going to continue to try to talk about the simple truths of things. And there are, of course, some high-minded ideals, but the reality is we have to take down the temperature on our political conversations that we're having out in the real world when we're even able to have them. Too many people are entering the sphere of public discourse way too hot. And it's toxic. The reality is we have a lot of people who want to engage in good faith, and a small amount of bad actors who are engaging in bad faith are poisoning the well of conversation for just about everybody. And we're starting to see the effects of this play out in real time. And I know I said earlier, it was the last time I was going to mention the Donald Trump thing, but the reality is that's a product of too much rhetoric. And we're seeing the disregard for expertise play out in real time since yesterday. I'll be honest with you. The only people that I want to hear about or hear about this event from, especially given the risks involved in that political climate, the only people that I want to hear about from are certified experts. I don't care what Timmy264 on Twitter says about, hey, you know what? I wanna weigh in on my thoughts because like this one time I shot a 22, and so I'm pretty much firearms expert. I don't want to hear that, and nobody else should. And we're seeing it play out in real time because there have been false photographs that have been circulated. People are getting taken in. And that's where it's critically important that we as the electorate and we as voters should be able to take a step back and go, oh, this seems like it could be really bad, rather than add my 2 cents because I want to be a part of the conversation. I'm just going to take a step back and wait for the people who do the things to figure out what the hell happened there. Rather than ascribe motive, I'm just going to sit back and wait to see what the hell happened there. And we need to not only be doing more of that as voters and members of the electorate, but we absolutely need to be demanding that from our elected officials and our politicians. That's the bottom line. Now, part of the reason why the breakdown was initially created willed into being, whatever you want to call it, was because we wanted to do our part to say to the people in power, hey, you know what? Um, the way that you're doing things isn't okay. That's not acceptable. And we're going to do our very, very best to try to have the most informed version of the conversation that we possibly can. And we are exceedingly grateful. Me, particularly, I'll speak for myself now. I am exceedingly grateful that we have had the opportunity to speak to so many experts in so many fields. And when the summer's over, make no mistake, we're committing to maintaining that. We've got a couple interviews that we're very excited about. We've got a conversation that we're hoping to put together in the next week about the situation of healthcare in Airdrie. We have a couple. We have one person in particular that we're really, really, really trying to get a hold of, but there's authorizations that need to happen before we can have that conversation. Apparently, but we have a couple of Plan Bs as well about the Bears, the Grizzly Bears, and we're not going to be talking to Joe the Hunter from Joe's Facebook page of dead animal heads, because obviously there's a bias there. We're going to be talking to scientists. We're going to be talking to experts. And that's who we should all be striving to be talking to. And that's particularly who our elected officials and our politicians should be striving to talk to. But they're not going to do it unless we demand it from them. Make no mistake, we are at an exceedingly dangerous point in history. I spent the last couple of days out camping in an amazing campground run by a First Nations family who were very generous with their time. They were the patriarch was very generous in having extended conversation with me that I was very grateful for. And when I started to get the text messages from the people saying, holy shit, this is it. This is Franz Ferdinand territory. We're in it now. They're not wrong. When smart people start to get scared, when the people who spend most of their time going, whoa, 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 everybody, we need to take it down a notch. It's not that bad. When those people start to say, oh, this is very, very bad, that's where we need to make sure that we're listening. And whether we're talking about political scientists like Dr. Dwayne Bratt and Dr. Lisa Young and Dr. Jared Wesley saying Alberta there's a creeping fascism that's happening here in Alberta. We should all be paying very close attention. We should be listening to those experts. When experts in the field of healthcare are talking about this is how bad the oncology situation or the cancer situation is in the province of Alberta. This is how badly outnumbered oncologists are by their patients. This is untenable and people are going to unnecessarily die. I don't need to see the Premier of Alberta doing abacus math on a live show trying to justify numbers that the experts have already said aren't acceptable. Period. We need to be listening to the experts. We need to be elevating the experts, because if we fail to do that, then these politicians who are already bought and paid for are going to continue to work for the people who paid for them to be there. Whether we're talking about energy lobbies, whether we're talking about hunting and fishing lobbies, whether we're talking about religious ideologues, that's who we have to be making sure that we're pushing back. I see there's a question in the chat. I want to speak to this. Somebody asked how many experts have to be jumping up and down before someone listens in the government. It's not the experts. It's the people. It's the people that need to be jumping up and down. I attended a protest a few weeks back. One of the things I said at that protest was people need to be showing up every week. People need to be making noise every week. The reality is we're fighting for our democracy here. We're fighting for democratic principles here. The ability to access democratic principles as members of the electorate, as voters, as citizens. That's what we're fighting for. And the fact that there is any degree of complacency is really quite alarming. But make no mistake, the only reason why that complacency exists is because not enough people have been presented with the right forms of the argument. Maybe we don't need to talk about coal's bad. Maybe we just need to talk about selenium's bad. Massive amounts of selenium in the water table are bad. Maybe that's all we have to say, because it stands the benefit of being unequivocally true. Now, I know this, I say this every show, and I know I say this at the end of every show, but you got to have the conversations. You got to talk to people. Because if you do, in ways of facts, that's how we avoid the emotional reactions that people have. When I brought up the Eastern Slopes to my friend's wife, she got going real fast because she was so angry about the oh, well, we have to get off of this and we have to get off of that. And there's no question that there's a global energy transition that's happening. And there's no question that ideally Alberta should be at the forefront of that. We're not doing so great with that, with the renewables pause and all of that. But that frustrated her. When we just talked about, yeah, but the poison in the water, that's bad, right? Oh, totally. No, that alone is reason why it shouldn't go ahead. I know I'm repeating myself here, but I'm repeating myself because it hit me in the face so hard. Let's find the one thing that everybody can agree on, and let's talk about that. Because make no mistake, as much as props to the premier. She managed to get through the stampede without posing for any like hate mongery t-shirts. So I guess that's where the bar is. She gets a plus for that, I suppose, this year. But the mining proposals that exist in the Eastern Slopes are still going ahead. The hearings are still happening. The fracking proposals that we talked about in regards to the dam and the proximity to the dam, those are still going forward. Those hearings are still going forward. It hasn't been stopped. When we get into depth on what's going on in healthcare with Danielle Smith and with Airdrie and with Angela Pitt and with the consortium that's been brought in to profitize access to healthcare in Airdrie, that's going ahead. I've said it before, and I'll say it again. And I hate the fact that I have to acknowledge this. I love the fact that it appears that he's not in Alberta anymore. But David Parker was right. He was right about a lot of things. And one of the biggest things that he was right about is that people are too apathetic. People need to be engaged in their democracy. And one of the great dangers that we face right now, particularly as the province gets ready to head into the UCP's annual general meeting and their policy convention and their leadership review, is that while David Parker may not physically be in the province of Alberta anymore, the ghost of David Parker very much is. Because the ghost of David Parker still has activated all of those people in all of the gross ways who are going forward to take over school boards because they have all of this misogyny, they have all of this homophobia, they have all of this transphobia. They're not stopping, which means we need to start. So there's the rant, folks. That's the show for this week. I want to remind everyone, I'm hoping, fingers crossed, that we're going to be able to get the interview on the Airdrie urgent care healthcare situation put together in the next couple of days. That'll go up first for our Patreon sponsors, and then it'll go live a couple days after that. We will, again, I cannot stress enough, you do not want to miss our conversation with Adam Zivo and Guy Felicella. I know for sure they've both committed. They've said that they're going to be there 7 p.m. MST or whatever the appropriate. Every time I say like MST or something like that, somebody's like, well, actually, it's this because of daylight savings time. It's 7 o'clock in Alberta time. That's when we're doing it. That is going to be a conversation that you absolutely don't want to miss. That's next Sunday at 7 o'clock. So I hope that everybody tunes in for that one or catches it after the fact on one of the many streaming platforms, because we set up another one because of the whole YouTube thing, or listens to it on the podcast. We do have one person. Sorry, the guitar is in the way. The guitar doesn't normally live over here. We do have one person who has requested to speak, so I'm going to bring in longtime friend of the show, Tammy, to share her thoughts. I think she might have something to say about selenium, but I'm not sure.
Well, I love that you use the argument that I used with a farmer friend of mine. Now, the problem with it, and it's a great argument, but the problem with it is even when you move the needle on that person, then what happened with my friend, who is a friend of a MLA here in Alberta, who's a real jerk. I'm not even going to say his name.
Please don't.
From the On-Away constituency. Anyway, that friend that's a friend of mine went to school with him, in high school with him, and he's a farmer from near our family farm. He went to talk to this friend who's an MLA, and he totally gaslit my friend, or tried to. A little harder because I'd actually given the friend of mine all the paperwork. Like, I literally gave them all of the veterinary articles that I could on selenium poisoning. But still, that UCP MLA tried to gaslight him. And when you have political people willing to literally lie,
yep,
to get their way, because he's pro of those big mining machines that the Australians will use, and the mountaintop, basically cutting the mountaintops off the top of mountains to do the mining. But because he's pro that, he's willing to lie. He's also one of the people that went to all of the sorry, it's my stroke.
Yeah, no, it's all good. I have a feeling you're about to say non-collegist conventions.
No, well, I don't think he was at well, maybe he was. No, I was talking about the folks that went down to Ottawa with the trucker.
Oh, the convoy.
Yeah, the convoy. He's pro the convoy. I won't use that word. So yeah, like this, and that's the problem with our UCP government. They are so in the pocket of industry because the industry is tossing them money back, right? They're in the pockets of those people because they're basically guaranteed a job.
Yep.
When they leave. That MLA that I was talking about, his family doesn't even live in Alberta anymore. He's out in somewhere in the States. I can't remember the place in the States.
Well, now I know who you're talking about.
His wife and kids are out living in the States, and he's an MLA. How does he... Like, he's got no skin in the game in Alberta anymore. He's got no care about maintaining Alberta for Albertans. He's in it for his pocket to be filled. That's what he's in it for.
But I think that's part of how framing the conversation works. And if I may,
go ahead.
The way that I would kind of the way that I've sort of said when people are saying, well, I'm going to talk to my MLA. Absolutely. Please do talk to your MLA. Here's the thing though. Yeah, I would start with the base assumption, like just be open to the possibility that what I'm saying is your MLA is in the pocket of big business, whatever big business we're talking about, whether it's
Mm-hmm.
mining coal or oil or hunting grizzly bears or just be
Yeah.
open to that possibility. And if they can't demonstrate to you how selenium's bad, if they can't say, "Oh no, selenium is actually great," and here's the article from Science that says, "Oh no, selenium actually it I don't know cures cancer or some such nonsense." If they can't present that when they say, "Oh no, it's not a concern," then you have to ask yourself, are they telling you the truth or not? And if you front load people with that, if you say to people, "Hey, I've got very good reason to believe that Todd Lowen and his decision to allow people to trophy hunt grizzly bears isn't about managing the grizzly population."
Yeah.
I think that, he's got this outfitting hunting gig that he has had for years and years and years. Danielle Smith talked about how much she enjoyed going up to his hunting lodge in the run up to the UCP leadership race.
Yeah.
This guy has a clear bias. And so who are the environmental experts that Todd Lowen has that don't have clear ties to, I don't know, big hunting?
Yeah.
And if he can't present those, then I just want you to be aware of the fact he might be fucking with you. Pardon my language.
You know I'm fine with that kind of
Well, yeah, I
language.
know. I try to keep it
I
manageable.
know. I know.
But
I on the bear thing, I had to share with everyone, and I hopped on YouTube to do it. I shared the link of the South Park episode
yes,
with the one guy's Uncle Bob, what Jim Bob,
yeah,
and how he goes, "Oh my God, he's gonna attack us!" And he shoots, and he's like, "Well, the rules say as long as they're gonna attack us, we're allowed to shoot them." And I'm like, that is just totally Todd Lowen. That is the Alberta government
yeah.
right now.
Well, see, and here's the thing for me, and I've said this elsewhere. I don't have a problem with subsistence farming. I don't have a problem if somebody wants to go out and harvest an animal and feed their family or feed their whatever their community or anything like that. I don't have a problem with any of that. I think that's
No.
fine. I'm vegetarian, so I'll find the other end of the buffet table. Thank you, but I don't have a problem with that whatsoever. What I do have a problem with is people who seem to measure their significance in life by their ability to take down big game using a completely unfair advantage. And
Absolutely.
the line that I said on the Twitter machine this week was, I'll tell you what, if you want to call it a sport, if you want to call it sport hunting, first you have to teach that animal how to use a firearm, and you have to give it to the animal, and you should probably give it a head start. And if you could do all of those things and it's a fair fight, okay, now it's a sport. But
Yep.
if it's not a sport if there's 15 people on one side of the soccer field and only one on the other one, that's just mean. And to say, hey, you know what, we're going to incentivize negative interactions with animals in um, uh, danger. I'm not using the
Yeah.
terminology correctly. I apologize for that. But if we're going to incentivize that, then you are setting people up to go out of their way to profitize killing grizzly bears, and
Yeah.
it's not okay. In my books, it's cowardice, quite frankly. If your
Yeah.
masculinity or if your sense of identity is so fucking weak that the best that you can do is use a great big gun to take down an animal from a safe distance for you,
Mm-hmm.
you're a coward. That's all I got to
Yeah.
say. Come at me, bro.
Yeah. And it's like everything about the current government of Alberta they've all got these really shady uh, um, business dealings. One of
Yes.
them is into fracking. And fracking, when we have things in northern Alberta that sound like it's an earthquake, guess what? It's not. It's fracking.
Yep. And the AER admits that. That's the thing that I think is so important. This is not, one of the topics that I was going to try to hit on tonight was the whole idea of conspiracy theories, because there is a real problem with conspiracy theories, and it
I
exists
know.
on both sides of the political spectrum. But a group of scientists have done the scientist thing, and they have said, and it's documented, and it's not just documented in a journal that you pay $50 and you get published in. It is accepted by organizations like the Alberta Energy Regulator, where they say, "Oh no, fracking totally causes earthquakes. We know this. This
Yeah.
is no longer up for debate. This isn't
Yeah.
this is fact. This isn't a conspiracy theory. This is just reality. And if you have a problem with that, then you have a problem with facts."
Yeah. I mean, one of the things that I ran into was on the okay, I'm one of these dirty middle people where I'm like, okay, yeah, normally I lean left, but sometimes I do occasionally lean right, or I don't lean as far left as some people do. So I ended up in a conversation about, with our need for power. And I'm not a huge fan of this, but I've spoke to, and my daughter, who's more educated than me, has spoke to some, um, what do you call it? See, this is the problem when I lose words. They're scientists of what everybody's scared of it. Nuclear.
Oh,
So
okay.
talking to nuclear scientists. And one of the things that one of the nuclear scientists said is that if we went to some of the smaller reactors, Alberta is actually, especially northern Alberta, is actually one of the perfect environments for it, because Alberta is so damn stable seismically, right? The bedrock, it's like there's nothing there. Like
Yeah.
for that. And some of the new nuclear, the small ones, they don't have that heavy burden for water anymore. Like there's a lot of the technology that has changed. And I'm not an expert in it. So my daughter had sent me an article on it that her nuclear scientist friend had sent her. So I read it and I went, "Oh, that's really cool. It's good to know that they're making progress in these ways." Um, and I basically set it aside. But then I got in a conversation. I didn't save where I put that article, so I couldn't share with the person. But they were totally no nuclear, never nuclear, no nuclear, never nuclear, because they're talking about old technology. And I'm like, but you have to understand, technology changes and things get safer the more we work on things. Like, you know what? I might not be anti selenium or anti mining as I was if I didn't know that so far there is absolutely no way of taking the selenium out of the water.
Yes.
There's none.
Yeah.
Doesn't exist. Right? They've tried. They're trying to figure it out. Can't do it. So science can't always fix everything, but when science advances and you can then do the thing, if you still need to do them, well, it's really good to know that you can without wrecking everything,
Yes.
right? It's not that I'm highly pro nuclear. I'm just saying, okay, they're right. As far as, Alberta, seismically stable, unless you're fracking, which is already wrecking the environment, right? They're
Yeah.
like, oh well, there's what shakes in Alberta, and it's like, yeah, because they're fracking there, which has a tie to the Alberta government. So one of them, and I'm like, oh, And then the other one that wants to bring in education, but vouchered
Yeah.
education. It's like they're all tied into the worst things that go on in the States.
Well, there's no question that there's a heavy. I mean, it's fascinating. Particularly, we saw it with Kenny to some degree, but I think that it runs even more unchecked now. In that there is a replication of a lot of the Republican style politics, and I think that that's really problematic because I mean, look where that's gotten them.
Yeah. Dwayne just asked, what about Fukushima? Fukushima is old technology, Dwayne. Just so you know, that was actually one of the discussions in that article that I was reading. Fukushima's old technology. They, just because a technology is being used, that doesn't mean that it's necessarily the newest technology.
Well, I mean, the other argument that, and this is where I want to be clear. I'm not advocating pro or against nuclear in any way. I am not a
That,
nuclear energy expert at all. But that being said, I look at how many of the United States critical military naval pieces use nuclear power, especially the ones what run underwater, and I go, I think they might know something. I
yeah,
mean, the reality is that Canada currently does run 18 nuclear reactors. I was looking that up as you were talking. I just don't have that committed to memory. But Canada does run 18 nuclear reactors right now.
yeah,
I think there are ways to do lots of things safely. I would probably argue that building nuclear reactors in places, as you said, that are prone to earthquakes and tsunamis is maybe not the best choice. But again, not an expert. Um,
yeah. I would agree on that one.
Lynn, thank you. Is there anything else you want to throw in there, Lynn?
It's Tammy, but no,
I'm
that
sorry.
was that's okay. Okay. Hey, if it was me, I'd be like, "What's your name?" You know, the stroke thing. I lose names all the time. So
At
you
least
get called in. That's all good. We're all good.
you've got a good excuse though. I just got too much sun. Like that's what my problem is I got way too much sun over the last couple of days. If you're watching the video, you can see I look like a tomato right now. Um,
So, so the only other thing I'm going to mention is, my promise to hopefully. I mean, it's in a very small way right now because I can't afford the bigger account. But remember how I promised to start identifying trolls on Twitter? Because I think part of this problem right now, especially if conversations are happening in places like Twitter, these social media spaces, is that we get trolls. We get
oh,
people
big
who
time.
are, you know. So I've started, my hashtag is, you got to know it, troll, just block,
Yep.
but just as one word. And then I'm using a tool, of course, Tech Girl, where I go and I actually run the numbers on the accounts that I pick up. And then I post. And I'll post something funny about them. I take a screenshot of the screen from the app that I'm using to get the numbers. And I add something either cute or goofy sometimes. Sometimes I give, you know, a, a, a bit of text context. Because what I said is, it's really easy to say these zero, well, I call them 0%ers. They're literally trolls that are just there. They're everybody, almost everybody on their account that they follow are all just junk accounts, right? So that's a 0%er. But 0%ers are easy to kind of go, oh yeah, troll, they're just noise in the background, right? The ones that are actually scarier are the ones that are a 20%er or a 15%er or a 33%er, because they don't always just appear like a troll.
Yeah.
They are a troll, but they don't appear like a troll. They're a troll in hiding. They're actually scarier. because they're the ones that come up with things that almost sound plausible
Well,
and cause the misinformation.
there's troll farms. I think we all know that
Oh yeah,
there's troll farms, and I think we all know that. I mean, it is documented again. I'm not being conspiracy theory here, but it's
nope,
documented again that there are foreign governments that spend a lot of money and a lot of resources making sure that, and they're for hire. I mean. There is an amazing journalist. She was the founder of the Filipino publication called Rappler. Highly recommend anyone check out the work that she's done, because she has done an incredible amount of work on highlighting the fact that there are foreign governments and there are governments who absolutely utilize troll farms to advance and destabilize specific agendas. But there are also troll farms that are just straight for hire. And I'm pretty confident that the breakdown has been targeted on a couple of occasions by troll farms for hire. So it's a real thing. And I'm glad that you're doing that work to try to bring awareness. I mean, my litmus test is,
yeah,
are they like a 15 account follow and one of their follows is Arthur C. Green? As soon as I see
yeah,
that, I'm like, nope, bought and paid for. I got no time for this.
yeah, yep. No, there are certain ones that their follows just tell them right away, um, and you go, oh yeah, that's a troll. But I have so many that I actually ran my max amount that I'm allowed to run on the account for this month, in fact. Um, so
It's
I
the
don't know.
14th.
I know. I just got it this morning. Yeah, but you got to remember, I'm autistic, so I get dug into something. It's almost like playing a video game. Woo-hoo, I'm gonna hunt the trolls. Hunt the trolls.
That's fair. Awesome.
So yeah. So I'm doing that. So if anybody is interested, like I said, hashtag troll just block.
There we go. Um, I want to say thank you so much. I am so embarrassed that I got your name wrong. That
That's okay.
is just mortifying for me, Tammy. You've called into the show so many times, and I just I will use this opportunity to answer one of the questions in the comments. I'm actually technically I'm a stealth ginger, so and I can use that word because I am, but I do have a fair amount of red that in particular shows up in the sunlight, and I am very fair skinned. I burn up in the sun quite easily, and this is even with sunscreen. I am so diligent about my sunscreen now, and I still got cooked.
So
So
yeah,
there we
yeah.
go. Tammy, thank you so much. I'm going to bring in. We got a new person who wants to weigh in, and then I'm going to shut it down for the night because I've had too much sun.
Have a good one.
Thanks, you too. We're gonna um I dumpling daddy. This could be interesting. I wonder if there's going to be another one of the Spider-Man things. Dumpling Daddy, if you unmute your
Yeah, I got me. It's John. It's John.
Oh,
You know
okay.
who I am. Come on, Nate. You know who I am.
I
Seriously,
it's
2 for 2, man. I'm joking. Seriously. So I just have a quick thing I do want to say. I do. One huge thing is I'm not really sure y'all saw the again the. Okay, this is actually something I know. This is going to be a little bit more light, little bit light going from what it is. You know how big of a soccer fan I am. I want to say the big thing is no member of any Alberta politician has mentioned the fact that an Albertan, raised in Edmonton, Alfonso Davies, was named and led Canada to one of the best performances at an international soccer tournament for the Canadian national team ever. I am very gobsmacked by that. I mean, how on earth does no one remember how to do that? So again, I'm going to put it out there. Seriously, what is going on with both the UCP and the NDP? Seriously, that is a little bit on the ooh, think someone didn't do their research kind of thing here. But again, maybe you might have some thoughts about that as well too. I know there's a lot of important things in there, but seriously, with so many Albertans kind of hating on Canada, you'd think that it would be an easy goal for the NBV to score, but clearly nothing. No one said anything. Not even Netchi said anything. So I mean, where do we go from here?
I mean, we can only go up. We
I
can
hope
only go
so.
up.
Exactly.
If we miss the shout out to the soccer, I mean, now we can say that the breakdown has, via its audience, acknowledged Canada's impressive soccer win. So go us. Thanks for that, John.
No worries. Hey, thank you so much. But hey, big thing as well too, right? I mean, seriously. Canada led by an Albertan, right? So come
Yeah.
on, really? I mean, easy goal for the NDB to score, but I guess they missed that one. So anyway, that's good. Hey, thanks, Nate. Thanks for doing what you do, my friend.
Oh, no worries. Thanks for tapping in with that, John. And
No worries.
I just want to say, I love Canada. I think I said I feel like, again, too much sun, so I apologize for tonight's performance. I think I used up all of my energy in the first 25 minutes, but I think that it's important to recognize that Canada has its flaws for sure. Canada has its historical injustices that it needs to uh, remedy and work to remedy, probably for the rest of Canada being a thing. But I believe in the ideals of Canada. I believe in the aspirations of Canada, and I love those things. And so when Alberta contributes to Canada doing something awesome, John's right. As much as I was laughing because I did not see soccer coming down the pipes today, any time that we can celebrate something as a country in a positive way, we should. So there's my thoughts on that. Thanks, John. And that's it for our speakers. That's it for our show. I'm going to do all the plugs now. So if you want to, you can turn out for the boring pseudo advertising stuff. Like I was saying, we're going to be having a conversation with a few folks in regards to the healthcare system in Airdrie, because it sounds like the promised hospital that was supposed to be coming to Airdrie is going to be not a hospital nor publicly administered healthcare. So that's super horrifying. We're going to get all the details on that because they recently had a couple of town halls. So that's the first piece. That conversation is going to go up first for our Patreon supporters. We're only able to produce the kind of content that we do here because of the support that we get from, well, our entire audience, but especially when it comes to the hardware and the upkeep on all of the software and the platforms and the subscriptions and the things, because of our Patreon supporters. So if you appreciate the kind of content that we're trying to produce here at The Breakdown, we would love it if you have the means, if you could sign up to be one of our Patreon sponsors at www.patreon.com/thebreakdownab. Now, that being said, we also have heard everybody's concerns that, hey, I just wanted to maybe give The Breakdown a one-time thing, or I'm not comfortable signing up for a subscription, or I don't like Patreon for a whole bunch of reasons. So we have also created the mechanism by which people can just do a direct e-transfer to info@thebreakdownab.ca. That's info@thebreakdownab.ca. And it's because of the support that we don't have to do the advertising, which is fantastic. So we are in the process. We are a hair's breadth away from getting the fancy camera thing that we wanted to get so that we can do more out in the real world stuffs. And that's entirely because of the financial support that we've received through the e-transfers and through the Patreon stuff. So big thanks to everybody who's been supporting us there. Also want to just throw it out into the ether. If you could leave the likes and the subscribes and all of that good stuff on the YouTubes, on the podcasts. We're on Twitch now. Even though we don't have anything to do with gaming, that was a platform somebody said we should be on, and it's very easy to set up an account. So we did. And that's it. That's the show, folks. I want to say a big thank you to, as always, our chat. I love the interaction that we get through the chat. I love that I was outed as a ginger tonight. I'm proud of who I am. I will not be ashamed of my ginger-esque roots. And big thank you to everybody who weighed in on the Twitter Spaces, everybody who's listening to the podcast version. If you're watching the video version of this, not live, hey, thanks for doing that too. And we will be back and I cannot say this enough, how excited I am for this conversation. Next Sunday, July 21st, 7 p.m., Alberta time, MT, I think is what the chat said I'm supposed to say instead of MST. Even when I'm slightly sun exhausted, I can still learn things. You do not want to miss our conversation between National Post columnist and avowed destroyer of all things safe supply, Adam Zivo, and safe supply, harm reduction, addictions treatment advocate, and a friend of mine, I'm proud to say, Guy Felicella. This conversation is going to be a do not miss. I cannot say that enough. And that's what I got. Talk to people. Pick one fact. One thing. One fact. Selenium is bad. I think we can all get on that same page. Selenium is bad. Talk to people about that if you care about the Eastern Slopes. Talk to people about the fact that Alberta students are the lowest funded students, not just in Canada, but apparently North America. I haven't had the chance to fact check that. I've seen it retweeted from a couple authoritative accounts, but like that's chilling if that's accurate. But you can for sure say Canada because the Alberta Teachers Association came out and said that. Find the one fact that's a fact. It's immutable. It's not ideological. It's just a fact. Find 3 people this week. Share that fact with those 3 people, whatever it is the issue that you're most passionate about. But we got to get people to realize the hellscape that we're potentially facing if we do not do a major course correction soon. So with all of that being said, take care of each other, stay safe, and as always, keep the conversation going.